So our next panel is always one of my favorites, and I appreciate the opportunity to be an audience member. I get to be on the other side of this and sort of listen. I'm going to introduce our moderator, and then I'll let him bring up the panel. But our moderator is someone who I've gotten to know very well over the past few years serving at the Chamber. He was a great leader to follow. He actually serves as our past board chair, so when I have questions, which I always do, I know I can call Greg. I'd like to introduce State Farm agent Greg Riddell. Let's give him a big round of applause, and he's going to moderate your next session.
Hi, I'm Greg.
Okay, next slide, please. I don't actually have a PowerPoint, but I think we're contractually obligated to say that so many times. Rather than belabor this by calling each of the delegation up individually, if you all would come up and take your seats on the dais, I'll introduce you as we go. Delegate Otto on the end. Senator Mautz. Carl, you look different. Yes. I think by this point you guys know these folks, so I won't waste a lot of time. We're going to change the format here a little bit. The delegates and senators will each have a minute and a half to respond to each question. You have white cards in the middle of your table, and there should be pens scattered around. As the presentations go on, if you have questions that you'd like to ask from the audience, please just fill them out, raise your hand up high, a member of the chamber staff will come by to pick them up, and our priority is to get those questions in. So we've got a series of questions to go through with the legislators, but as I say, our priority is you. So that said, we're going to try, we've got a couple of questions that we're going to address to everybody, but rather than just kind of do the laundry list of everything to everyone, we've tried to target the questions to those legislators based upon their committees of jurisdiction. I think this will get you more in less time and frankly save time at the end for your questions. If there's time at the end, we'll give each of the delegates and senators a minute to kind of give a recap of whatever they'd like to talk to. But guys, that's last on the priority list. So if we don't get there because of audience questions, we'll lean into the audience questions. So that said, give me 5 minutes to find my glasses so I can tell what I'm reading here.
Sandy's always front and center, isn't she?
Let's jump right in here. This is for everybody, so we'll start with Senator Carozza. Choose 2 issues or bills that have already pre-filed that will be heard before your respective Senate or House committees. Of those 2 issues, choose one that will adversely impact Maryland business, like dropping a microphone, and one that may help business.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this. The timing is perfect given the challenging session that's coming up. I'm going to start with something that the Senate President mentioned when he was here for his presentation. He mentioned my work on the Apprenticeship 2030 Commission, and the reason I wanted to share that with you is it ties into our workforce shortages. This is a commission that was set up to specifically address the workforce shortage issues, as well as meeting the requirements of the blueprint. And we have very challenging goals, 60,000 apprenticeships by 2030, and 45% of high school graduates to complete the equivalent of a high school level registered apprenticeship by 2030. So as a member of that commission, I've included the Tri-County Council, Lower Workforce Alliance. I've included our CTE instructors from all 3 counties. Pohanka's been involved, Delaware Elevator, Seaside Plumbing. And as we worked on this, we came up with a problem we discovered, which was the tax credit, the apprenticeship tax credit wasn't working for all of our was not working for all of our businesses. And so as a result of the recommendations that came out, and Seaside Plumbing was at the forefront, we are going to go forward and make sure that the current existing apprenticeship tax credit actually works for businesses like Seaside Plumbing and the construction trade. So that's something that's coming out, and we'll be looking to you to support that initiative because it is a pro-business initiative.
That was a mic drop moment if I ever heard one. Senator Mautz.
You want a good one and a bad one?
Yes, please.
Okay. I got a good one and a bad one for everybody. It's, I would say Christmas tree, but there's a bad one. So the good one is that we're supposed to get the study back on professional associations pooling costs to form healthcare policies. That's something that's been sought after for years now. There have been loophole after loophole or hurdle after hurdle, put before the proposal to allow professional associations to pool resources to try to offer more health care plans for their employees or their members. That's we're looking forward to that report and hopefully have something to be able to put into legislation this session. On the bad side, for the past few years, this bill has come back. I expect it to come back again this year, and that is to start trying to somehow do a statewide mandate on a 4-day work week. So that has been in the works. It's come over and over, and I suspect it will come back again this year. I've opposed it every year, and hopefully this year, if it dies, I can say that I helped kill it, but I will oppose it again this year.
Delegate Adams.
Thank you. So Delegate Chris Adams, I'm a private business owner. I serve on Economic Matters Committee. My chairman and I believe our General Assembly is going to have a year of energy policy this year. That'll be one of the priorities, and it'll be interesting. Nuclear is going to be part of the discussion. We're going to have small nuclear, but also think Calvert Cliffs. We're going to be talking about trying to help modernize and increase the production of that. Why does that matter? Because just a couple years ago, we passed the Climate Solutions Now Act that basically bans natural gas. I think it far too pushes forward offshore wind and solar. And so look, if we want solar and wind, and I don't want wind, let me just be blunt, you have to have baseline of affordable energy. So the fact that the Maryland General Assembly likely is going to pass legislation this year that will adjust the RPS and make nuclear a newfound focus is a good thing for the state of Maryland, notwithstanding my issues with some of the other projects that do affect the Eastern Shore. As a business owner, the negative for me, and look, it's going to be for any business person, is not going to come out of my committee. It's going to be the budget bill. I mean, we have one bill to pass as a legislative initiative. That is the budget. And if we pass this bill without doing severe and important cuts, what's going to happen is we're going to have tax increases. And my business is going to pay more in corporate income taxes. Payroll taxes will go up. And everything that should help businesses like me grow and expand will go to the government. But why? So I think that the legislature is going to have to make some decisions. Are we going to cut spending? Are we going to raise taxes? That decision is before us, and I hope that the minority party, the Republicans, can win on some of these debates, because without it, our Economic Matters Committee is going to have a whole world of problems moving forward.
I always heard you had a lot of energy. Delegate Hartman.
Thank you. So I serve in the Ways and Means Committee. We get all the fun stuff of tax, education, racing and gaming, and election law. So, taxes have seemed to have been the conversation today. So sticking with that, from a corporate standpoint, I think we're going to see combined reporting come back. I really do. Probably Water's Edge. I think it's been tried for 3 years now. Last year, I think there was 2 versions of it. One that was Water's Edge, one that was global. What is this, the 4th time maybe? 4th time might be the charm. So we hope not. We'll be doing everything we can, I can assure you, to push back on it. It's not even necessarily going to be a win for the state, because with combined reporting, if there's losses somewhere else, they could be drug in to offset income that they would have been taxed on in Maryland. So hopefully we can defeat that again. I'm going to bend a little, since taxes are such a high priority. I think a sales tax or a tax on services will be coming back. I think it's going to be modified. I think we're going to see, for some reason, Annapolis doesn't like successful folks, people that are doing well. So they're going to tax luxury items, so your little spa treatments might get 6% added to them. your veterinary services, laundry, the dry cleaning. That's my crystal ball. It said things that have been pre-filed. I don't think any of the pre-files available on the MGA website. So I'm doing the crystal ball, and just from what we're hearing. So last year, the caucus priority was a tax alteration of our personal income taxes. We're 43 in the country, as I said earlier. I think the caucus will be putting something forth with that once again this year. And I'll stop. Thank you.
This is an appropriate time to say welcome to Delegate Barry Beauchamp, who is new to the panel. Okay, so that level of applause was right here. Now let's hear the applause for not having to listen to Carl Anderton's jokes anymore.
Well,
Delegate Beauchamp.
it's nice to be here, and I would say that not a pre-filed bill, but a bill that's passed, and it was passed in 2022. The Maryland Time to Care Act is, I'd say that's bad news. Basically, if you have a company that has more than 15 employees, then basically what they do is they must allow 12 weeks out of a 12-month period for time off. I just feel like that crushes small business. 99% of the business in Maryland are small businesses. I don't think that's sustainable. Now the good news, House Bill 50, known as the Business Relief Act, it's a pre-filed bill for 2025 session. And basically this bill aims to provide various forms of support and relief for challenges basically that were posed from COVID. It's basically a carry-on from that. And any relief that we can help small businesses with, if that's 99% of the businesses in the state, then I would say that I would certainly be in favor of that.
You really like this applause thing, don't you?
Who, me? Well, no, I'm not used to this. I was on an excavator this morning digging holes, and now I'm up here. So, I'll get used to this seat, but it's going to take a while.
Delegate Sample Hughes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Certainly a great opportunity to be here with you again during this opportunity here at Salisbury University to talk about economics. My committee in the House now is Judiciary. I have served on the Health and Government Operations Committee for 8 years, and then Economic Matters, and now Judiciary. So to answer the question with regards to what might be some of our top priorities, off the bat, I would really look at 3 primary issues. One in particular, last year, as many of you know, and it still needs to have a lot of work done, is that juvenile justice reform. What has happened at the onset of the legislation that we just passed is that a commission has been formed, and November the 1st, that commission has started their work, and that is led by a judge, Judge Davis in particular, who's been on the bench for about 30-some years. And so the goal with that is to look at some of the issues that are within Department of Juvenile Services, and then also ones that we have, laws that have been passed that have been detrimental to the state of Maryland. The other area that I believe will come up is retail theft. That is one where we have had grave concerns, and a lot is not discussed about it. But often, this last session, we had the owner of Ace Hardware come forward to us and share with us the crime that has constantly plagued her business. And we dealt with that in Judiciary to put on some parameters, but there's still more work that needs to be done. And I'll share the third one later.
Delegate Otto.
She read the stop sign. Greg, congratulations for promoting this on the radio yesterday morning. I was listening to you. You did a fine job. The issues we face, I'm on Environment and Transportation Committee, funding our transportation system in Maryland. We operate 2 mass transit systems in Maryland, basically off the state taxpayer dollars. And also, we have a road system that I think has been fine and nice and good, but we have to maintain it. And the Transportation Trust Fund is being drained for other things. And that's the difficult part, is how we're going to electric vehicles don't pay taxes into the trust fund, other than the excise tax when they buy them, and then we give them a rebate on that. So it's ridiculous. And the Francis Scott Key Bridge is going to be a serious thing, and that's the positive thing that we have to do for commerce and all, for the Port of Baltimore and for the supplies that we use in agriculture down here. We had challenges after March to get materials into Salisbury because of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And those are the big issues we're going to face.
Yeah, I'm convinced that the legislature really didn't pass recreational marijuana because they wanted the revenue from the sales of the marijuana. They just didn't want anybody else to notice the budget deficit. Again, to everyone, maybe it's my jokes that need to go. Tell the audience how each of you worked to change the positions of legislators that disagree with your positions. That's obviously a priority in an environment that we live in, especially with the makeup of the Eastern Shore delegation versus the makeup of the entire legislature. Delegate Otto, why don't we just start with you and come back?
Thank you, Greg. That is an important question, and it's not necessarily being liked, but being respected. And you tell the truth, and you work with others and feel the issues that they have in their district as well as yours, so that they'll listen to you again. And you do that by participating in the committee meetings in our different committees. And we have site visits during the summer. In November, we went down to Solomon's Island for 2 days and went to Point Lookout and had a demonstration from the DNR police and things. And that gave us a time that we weren't beating heads against one another, but we could communicate and feel what's going on in their district. So that's the only way I know how to do it.
Delegate Sample Hughes?
Sure. I would elaborate just even more so, as Delegate Otto mentioned, that it is about education of our colleagues, and it's about that level of respect. Often you probably already know that I don't waver a lot on things. I just hold where I am on an issue. But I do that through the education process of locally knowing my space, but then also understanding other parts of the state. I travel a lot around the nation, but I also understand how it impacts Montgomery County, how it impacts Baltimore City, Hartford, and Carroll County as well. And so to that end, we have opportunities to educate our colleagues. Case in point, we were in Stevensville a couple weeks ago at the Chesapeake Charities event. That event highlighted the watermen of the state of Maryland. And so while a lot come from our Eastern Shore area, but we also have watermen in the Annapolis area and Baltimore County area. And so when you have colleagues that reside in those areas and represent those constituents, then we can build upon that, and we can share that these are the challenges that we have, and these are the resources that we have as well. I think one area that we're gonna have to do some serious homework on this year is the solar farming issue, where it goes to that a lot of the farming space wants to be taken up here on the Eastern Shore. And it's exciting. I guess people from the Western Shore think it's exciting, but at the same time, we're the ones who's not going to benefit from that. And there's got to be a balance. And I think we're all going to have to say that message and give it loud and clear that there's got to be a balance while we are moving towards this renewable space.
Delegate Beauchamp.
How am I going to convince people to do what I think they should do the same way I convince my wife? And that's with facts.
We're just screwed.
That's with facts, you know. There are times when, you know, facts will matter, and there are times when facts won't matter. You know, if people have their mind made up, then basically it's tough to change a person's mind. What I say is I'll work from common ground. The things that we do agree upon will work from that point out. It's a lot easier to work from that point than it is trying to pull someone together from opposite ends of something. So that's how I would do it.
Delegate Hartman?
I think a big part of it is relationships and credibility. You know, I think we need to understand that we're in a blue state. If you look up here, most of us are Republicans. And, so when you have a state just dominated by, no
He
offense.
said most.
I said most, yeah. I didn't forget you.
Oh, no. I'm
See,
fine.
relationships,
Shoulder said sorry.
So, we have to realize where we are. We can't be on the floor throwing bombs and just saying stuff that's going to irritate other people, and you're not going to get anywhere, and you're not going to get anything for doing it. But, so I really think it's the way you conduct yourself. Pre-session meetings, right now on a few pieces of legislation, I'm meeting with committee chairs and things of that nature, finding out where they are on it, what kind of information they want to see, just make them aware of it. Your work ethic there. People realize how serious you take the position, how passionate you are. So I think that's a big part of it. And a lot of times it's all of you. When there's something that we need you for, we need you. We need you to testify. If I'm sitting up there by myself with a bill, the committee's wondering, who are you here for, yourself? So if there's a bill that you're interested in, you're going to hear me talk about this more with another question, we need you up there. We heard interim committee events, that goes to buying into with the relationships and things. And I think for my position, as part of caucus leadership, there's sometimes the Speaker's office is reaching out to us, asking us for input as to what we're looking for in a bill to make it more palatable so that there could be consensus and unanimous support on it. So it's a lot that goes into it.
So the vast majority of success that I've had is in committee during bill hearings. My committee chairman cuts me loose. I have no problem fighting and arguing and debating in committee, and we do fight and kill a lot of legislation in committee. It's important to remember that when you're up there, 80% of everything we do in Annapolis is bipartisan in nature, that there's cooperation where you would expect it. Of that 20%, you would expect somebody like me as a business owner to go up there and fight and try to win on merits, win those debates, and I do my best to do that. The other element of this is I'm the chairman of the Eastern Shore Delegation. I've got the pleasure and the fortune to be able to do that for a 4-year term. We, as an Eastern Shore Delegation, speak with unity on issues that are very important to us, whether it's the environment, whether it's our agriculture community that often finds themselves on the defensive. As business people, we like self-determination on the Eastern Shore. We like to be left alone for the most part. And so when things happen in Annapolis that's far too aggressive, taking control over our municipalities, over our counties, these are places where the Eastern Shore Delegation can and does remind Annapolis that we know how to get things done. Thank you very much. So that's my answer to that one.
Delegate Adams, thank you. Senator Mautz.
So I'll pull on some of the wisdom of my predecessors. Senator Colburn, one of his mottos was, you can never ask enough. So just keep asking as much as you can. Does many people in this room remember Senator Colburn? No? Yeah, once he gets a crawl, you just keep going back. And Senator Eckert is always to be kind and considerate. And that approach in dealing with your colleagues, I think, goes a very long way, that combination. But in my experience in serving the General Assembly, the most powerful thing, the most powerful tool that we have are the facts and the experiences from our constituents. And our strength really comes from the people in this room and the people in our district that can give us firsthand experiences that support the arguments that we're trying to make in Annapolis. Using large facts and figures fall on deaf ears because they get repeated, you see them in the news. But when you can point to a specific business, a specific individual, a specific problem with life circumstances being directly affected by that issue, that hits home. And it's not deniable and it won't be dismissed. The legislators come from districts that are very unique throughout the state. And one thing I think is universally understood is that each district is very different. So when we bring those facts and discuss them, people take them wholeheartedly, and they make a world of difference when we're trying to support or oppose an issue.
Senator Carozza.
Thank you. I'm going to quickly go back to question 1 because I wanted to flag it for this group particularly. Bills that could hurt businesses in my committee, Senate Education, Energy, and Environment, are increased regulations and increased costs to our poultry industry and poultry growers. So I want to flag that now. We expect those bills to come. They come every year, so flagging it now. And we need to kill them as we always do.
You see Zach back there nodding.
Okay.
Like,
as far as the working with colleagues with opposing positions, the shared experiences and new factual updated information with colleagues, sharing that both in the district and in Annapolis is critical, and maximizing your committee position. So for example, I want to continue a practice where I brought my colleagues on the committee down to the shore. My first year in the Senate, we had my colleagues in a poultry house, so they could actually see that it's cooler inside the poultry house and outside of the poultry house. We've had my colleagues on a boat in the Ocean City Inlet, seeing some also by SACC to see the shoreline projects we have there and that we need, so that Maryland Coastal Bays is on the map and not just the Chesapeake Bay. So those are the type of experiences that I would like to continue.
speaking of your continuing, let's just keep it with you. Senator Carozza, Maryland is a net importer of power. That demand will continue to rise as we build more data centers and the state utilizes more electricity as we head towards compliance with the benchmark set in Maryland's Climate Solutions Act of 22. As a member of the Senate Education, Energy, and Environment Committee, what possible legislation will address this electric capacity issue?
Okay, so we heard from the Senate President earlier today, and he said the two big issues for the session are going to be the budget and energy. And I actually, in talking to my chairman of the committee, Brian Feldman, who is an expert on energy policy, as well as Steve Hershey, who's from the shore, which really helps us. Number one, I think we're looking at a real crisis when it comes to generating electricity in the state of Maryland. We are looking at right now, Maryland currently imports 40% of its electricity, but with all the mandates with the 2022 Climate Solutions Now Act, with the forcing the shutting down of the plants and the no nuclear energy facilities online at this point, and Maryland utilities cannot generate their own powers with all those issues, Maryland will be importing 70% of its electricity in the future. So we have what we are calling a resource adequacy crisis in Maryland. And so there is now a package of bills. I've been working with Senator Chris West, who has a package of bills to address this. Bills that would also, Chair Feldman has some bills as well. And it will be a bipartisan approach to address it. Everything from making sure we actually have a Maryland plan when it comes to electricity, to pulling back on the climate solutions now, and even an EV bill that would look at making sure that our auto dealers are not penalized and scaling back from that California model. So it's all going to be coming through the committee. There's going to be a lot on the table. We need to hear from you.
I think I heard a charge there. Senator Mautz, your committee will be hearing from the Maryland Department of Labor this session on the proposals to overhaul the state's unemployment insurance fund. I wonder if I spoke a little bit faster, if I might be able to get elected to the Senate in Delaware. Let's see, the intended changes are to require higher premiums, adding an administrative fee to employers, and altering the unemployment insurance tax tables. On the heels of family, which kind of blasted small business last year, how will you try to impact the financial impact of that? How will you mitigate the impact of that on small business in Maryland?
Yes, that is going to be a very difficult issue for us. You know, that fund is regulated by federal law because it receives federal funding and has to be at a certain level. One tool that we've used that I'm sure is going to come up is try to find ways to rearrange the funding so that you have a different tier and keep the return rate at a lower tier. Return rate meaning the amount employers have to contribute. But the fact of the matter is if we are at a point where increases are required, there may be no way to get around that, which is a very serious consideration, especially considering that the Family Medical Leave Act is out there And I'm not exactly certain at this point when it's about to start collecting funds from employers. I'm not sure if everyone in the room is aware, but last year, sort of in the dark of night, that law was changed to include all employers. So if you were excluded from contributing to that fund, whether you're covered or not covered, now all employers are going to be required to submit funds. And the amount of that fund in a year's time went from an estimated $800,000 to $2 billion, so it more than doubled. I expect there to be a hearing on that by the AELR committee. I've requested a hearing about the emergency regulations they put forward. But to get back to the more fundamental issue on unemployment insurance and how we're going to handle that, we're going to focus on the tiers and try to keep the lowest tier in place as long as possible.
I was sitting with a business owner in the back when Mary, the president of the state chamber, was talking, and I'm hearing the same sense coming out of that. He looked at me and said, I think I just listed my house while I was listening to her speak. I hope we're not listing my business too. Delegate Beauchamp, let's jump over to you. You've been assigned to House Appropriations, which heard testimony on legislation that failed last session that would have allowed the governor to address the funding disparity for UMES by adding $5 million to their general budget. Would you support this legislation if it came back in 2025?
Well, no, I wouldn't. And, I read over the bill, and basically, I'd never be in favor of an open-ended funding of $5 million a year for anything. There has to be an end to it. And, the state of our budget right now at $2.7 billion deficit, I would say that there are going to be issues. We're going to need roads to have roads paved, and basically we aren't going to have the funds for them. I certainly think that, institutions like this university and UMES, have the basis to stand on their own. And I think that there are times when that must happen. We must prioritize to me, the way that we spend money, because there comes a point in time where there is an end. There is that you can't spend money that you don't have, And I also have to lean on that the bill was killed. I'm a freshman at this, so I'm probably the most junior, or not probably, I'm the most junior person here. And basically, I really depend on what the other legislators basically did. I would have to think that their judgment, when they looked at the bill, they thought it was bad. So, and just that alone, I would say, no, I probably wouldn't vote for it.
You mean there's ways to address the budget deficit without raising extra money? How can that be? Delegate Hutchinson, you serve on the House Health and Government Operations Committee.
He's not here.
Oh, he isn't, is he?
No.
We'll skip that one. Delegate Adams.
There you go.
Ask for it.
You're here.
Throw the curveball now.
Maryland faces a severe structural deficit in '26 and needs funding to backfill the State Transportation Trust Fund. I know that's been mentioned already, but is there any reasonable approach to closing those gaps without massive tax hikes and what those hikes potentially might do to a Maryland business?
Right. So in a minute and a half, I have to go through the budget conversation, which is tough, but it has to start with the national election. If it wasn't brought up earlier, great for the country. We have a $35 trillion debt. Bad for Maryland because the president's going to cut, and Maryland is so heavily dependent on federal contracting, federal employment. And so if we as a country are going to resolve our issues, that's going to put the state of Maryland in a terrible spot financially. The Augustine Commission a number of years ago predicted this, and they gave the state of Maryland a roadmap to how to solve the problem, which is to increase and improve the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the state. In other words, help the private sector help grow your budget responsibilities and fund them. So what's the state going to do? The state is likely going to take Kerwin or the Blueprint funding and push it off 2 years. They're going to do it for two reasons. One, we can't afford it now. Two, they don't want Westmore to run on a re-election with tax increases and, frankly, budgets that are being busted by $2.7 billion obligations. Our education plan, whatever it is we did a few years back, is busting our budget, okay? So they're going to fix it. I believe that the Senate president was here. I didn't listen, but they probably are not going to raise taxes this year. So what I would challenge the legislature to do is to not simply push off education because today it's going to solve the $2.7 billion problem, but to own the problem. I said it yesterday, own this issue with ongoing spending, not just for education, but the entire program of government. Westmore presents the budget. Present us a reasonable budget. Be serious about the fact that we will never be able to afford education the way that Britt Kerwin and that commission created. Start there and then build from there, because in 2 years you're running for re-election. Do not, in my opinion, do not, if you want to run and win, run on a tax increase platform like Martin O'Malley did.
I hate to break it to you, but I know one of the things that Senator Ferguson said was that he didn't blame the budget deficit on education. Your work will be cut out for you.
We're there.
Didn't you tell them?
Delegate Sample Hughes, you already started down this path, so I'm really anxious to let you continue with that. Obviously, the United States nationally saw a big swing toward more conservative approach to juvenile justice, but to justice in general across the country. And you've been kind of ahead of that game already here. What can you do more, and what do you anticipate the General Assembly will do to deal with that issue?
Sure. So to expound upon the original conversation about what we've done this year, with that commission, their work just started, as I said, as November the 1st, but I would anticipate, and I hope through that process while we're in session, that any new glaring suggestions that may come from our state's attorneys, our law enforcement, our nonprofits that work in the communities with young people, if it's something that we can do while we're in session and make a decision and not wait for a report to come out on October the 1st to the governor and the General Assembly, I would hope something positive comes to that. We have made some other reforms as it relates to parole and probation, where last year we had a gentleman come before the committee who talked about, parole and probation never even came out to see him for like 4 or 5 years. And it was only during COVID is when they checked in and say, hey, you alive? But that gentleman still had to continue to pay fees. So we did away with that because it makes no sense. We have to look internally what is happening in these agencies, and mainly I'm talking about justice, and see where we can make those changes, what makes sense, and what can be done to assist the communities, whether it is rehabilitation programs for our young people or whether it is making it more stringent, in which, in my opinion, I think it needs to be when we look at first-degree offenses, specifically first-degree murder. We have young people now with the policies that we're working through that if you're ages 10 to 12, you are then able to be a part of the Department of Juvenile Services. But that entity of itself needs a whole lot of work and needs a whole overhaul.
Before we go any further, now would be a really good time to raise those cards up. If you have a question that you'd like us to submit, we'll come by and pick them up. And you're not going to want to hear it if I have to fill the whole time, so feel free to ask a question. Let's see, Delegate Otto. You seem to be our agriculture delegate every year.
Well,
Thank you for that.
I think I earned it.
I think you have to.
Every day.
As you know, MDE is currently working on the 2025 CAFO permitting and will replace the 2019 permit upon its expiration. Many growers are expressing frustration that despite having no changes to their nutrient management plan, they're made to go through the same lengthy permitting process as everybody else. And I know this wasn't in the question, but Delaware doesn't require every 5 years, they require 10 for basically the same thing. And this is for the audience's benefit. This is a federal mandate that's what's required, but they have to apply through the state. And it's a tremendous hardship on growers who are basically, they've already been certified and they're just renewing it, and the process is very onerous. Is there anything we can do with that?
The department is working on it. MDE is working on it now. They've had 3 or 4 listening sessions. One, I think, was virtual, of people, stakeholders could bring up the opportunity of issues that they had with the existing permit. We don't have a draft yet. There'll be a formal process going through to renew this discharge permit. well, it's really a non-discharge permit is what it amounts to. But it's called a discharge permit, and it is renewed with the federal government every 5 years. The state of Maryland gets the authority to issue those permits on the general permit program. The Department of Agriculture is working on proposals to change some of their regulations to coincide with the nutrient management plans and the discharge permit, to increase them from every 3 years to 5 years. And that's a positive impact that I think would be well for everyone. And I would encourage everybody to participate in this project as they go forward with the permitting process, to take out redundant factors. I mean, there's things that have to be documented daily of things on the farm that you see, which is ridiculous. And looking at your manure structure every week, which why shouldn't that be between flocks or something to that effect, are the points that I've tried to make to simplify the whole process.
You may be the only person I've ever run into who could say, looking at your manure structure from a podium like this one. That's impressive.
I saw what topic you gave me.
How is the state, and specifically the Eastern Shore economy, prepared to respond to the rising health crisis of increasing needs in the aging population and decreasing availability of professional caregivers? And this is directed from the audience to both Mary Beth and Sheree.
I'll let Sheree go first since she was on health.
I'm going to read it one more time so you know, since you know you're going to be. How is the state, and specifically the Eastern Shore economy, prepared to respond to the rising health crisis of increasing needs in the aging population and decreasing availability of professional caregivers? How are we going to get more folks to do that job?
Okay, great, thank you. So a couple of things come to mind. Yesterday I had a very extensive conversation with a nurse practitioner, and she was making me aware that the rates, reimbursement rates for nurse practitioners are gravely lower than physicians. You might say, okay, that makes sense. However, on the Eastern Shore, while we have a shortage of physicians in certain specialties and across the board, we're leaning now more on our nurse practitioners to take up that load. And with that being said, they now, through state law that we passed, they now have the ability to have their own practice and open just like physicians. And so we must look at that, because if we want people to come to the area, we have a graying shore, and so we have to make sure that those reimbursement rates are looked upon. The other area, and I went yesterday, met with Deer's Head, our dialysis division, they have certain concerns about the transportation. On Saturdays, our shore transit does not operate to provide those services for transportation, and about 158 missed appointments on Saturdays. These are connections that people need to stay alive. So those are grave concerns, and those are things that we have to look at and what we need to make sure that we can provide some assistance to. I know the Community Foundation has provided some grants for free tickets for people to get to dialysis treatments, but that is certainly the tip of the iceberg. The other area I think that we certainly need to look at is that we have a new hospital that we just broke ground for up in the eastern area. It's going to be beneficial to the Eastern Shore, and I believe that's going to be an area where we can attract additional persons to serve in those capacities. But we've got to close the gap by making sure when they come to the area, we incentivize it, and we've done that throughout the years. Senator Eckhart and I worked on legislation to make sure that those who have to pay back loans, that they can help, they get some financial assistance to do that, but yet come to the rural community.
Senator Carozza?
Yes, as a delegation, we need to recognize that Delmarva has a disproportionately higher aging population, so we start there. And this workforce shortage with doctors and other healthcare providers across the board then hits us a lot harder. Last year, after working on it for 3+ years, I sponsored and we passed the Physician's Assistants Modernization Bill. What this bill did was allow for some expanded authorities for physician's assistants, but still recognizing that doctors were the supervisory with those responsibilities. This is very important, especially in a rural area like ours, where physician's assistants then can meet some of the needs of our constituents across the board, including some of mine on Smith Island. Also wanted to mention that we recently, as a delegation, were briefed by Tidal Health, and what Tidal Health is doing with the residency program and the build out there is going to meet our needs, and we are all supporting those efforts. And I think we need to continue to take a regional approach to healthcare because of increased costs, and that's something that I think we as a delegation will be a shared priority.
I'm throwing a curve to these guys, and that was by taking Delegate Hartman's question and moving it to the end, and that is specifically because I really want to get input from all of you based upon what we heard this morning. And that question was, and I'll start with Delegate Hartman, would you support a cut in the corporate income tax for Maryland next year?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier in the panel, to me, that's, that'll be a bill that'll have until it passes, until I pass, one or the other. But, I think it's so important. It's, as Pennsylvania lowers their rate, we're kind of here by ourselves. And if you heard the stats I was given earlier about Maryland's position in the country as far as our business friendliness and all the other factors, we're not doing real well. And in fact, a lot of those are on 10-year trends, and the last couple of years have been worse. So I expect those numbers to keep moving in the wrong direction until we do something. So absolutely. But the real big thing is, when we have that bill, we need people there behind us to testify. And I'm not going to mention any names, but I'm sitting here looking at folks from like the Maryland Chamber or the Salisbury Chamber. We need people there. We can't be there by ourselves presenting this bill. We need more than letters. We need people to know that it really matters and who it matters for. And in a previous session, I think Delegate Mautz was the co-sponsor in the Senate, and I think up here we already resolved that he's going to co-sponsor it again this year. So we got that worked out while we're up here, so it was good.
We need witnesses.
And the reason I asked the question the way I did is because when we heard Senate President Ferguson earlier today, and the Senate Majority Leader from Delaware, both of them argued with the form of the question we asked, which was a virtual doubling of federal revenues, even though the tax rate was dropped. And I don't know what the actual answer to that question is, but both of them acknowledged that the revenue did not go down. They just talked about the deficit. Well, the deficit was because of increased spending due to COVID. If we cut the tax rate, and by their own admission, we kept the revenue the same at minimum, if not increased, would all of you on this panel support a reduction in the corporate tax rate for Maryland, assuming that we would have revenue increases? And if you wouldn't, please feel free to argue with me. I'm not stating facts. I'm just talking about what I see, and I'd love to hear your input. Anybody on the panel who would like to jump in?
I mean, I'll be fast. I've already said that the Augustine Commission 10, 12 years ago talked about any number of different tax proposals, one of which being reduce the corporate income tax. And you do that not only because it's a smart idea, it's because it incentivizes, encourages businesses to stay and grow in Maryland. That's as simple as that. So does it lead that the answer as to why we don't have problems with lower dollars coming into the state coffers because we lowered the tax rate? Well, no, because frankly, that means you have more economic development. That's, to me, the natural way to grow out of any type of budget problem. I mean, federally, how are we going to get out of a $35 trillion debt? Ultimately, our nation is going to be more competitive. It's going to grow. We need to make that number look small in relationship to our GDP. Same thing with Maryland.
Senator Mautz?
I'd like to add to that. I think there's a reservation when you say corporate tax cut in Annapolis. They say, oh, the corporations, this is going to help corporations. Well, our economy, regionally, we know we're behind all of our neighbors regionally, we're at the bottom tier nationally, and we don't have the economic growth. And there are so many economic experts with so many different ways to go about fixing that. The Maryland Chamber has a website. There's about 6 different things that can be done according to the Maryland Chamber that would help fix that. But of anything, one of the quickest, easiest ways to spark economic growth is to cut the corporate income tax. It's very simple, and it's been proven. We're talking about it right now here in Maryland, but it's been done in other places around the country over the last 20 years, and that's why we're so high and so many others are so much lower. For some reason, it hasn't caught traction, but everyone should rally behind that because it's proven, it works, and there are a number of things that can come up, but it's a clear issue that you can focus on that you know will be successful.
Yes.
Does anybody on the panel have a contrary view? Or
No, I'm not contrary to it at all. I think you're absolutely right. A tax rate cut on corporate income taxes is important. It's double tax. Most of the family operations, family businesses are operated as a corporation, and it would spur investment by the corporation into innovative ideas, be it artificial intelligence or new investment in facilities and production. I mean, it's a win-win.
I'd like to dovetail off of that. I spent the last 4 days in Washington at an ALEC conference, and what that is, that's basically American Legislative Exchange Conference. And Utah, if you want to hear or see like the model for this, it would be the state of Utah for the last 17 years has been #1 with this. And basically by reducing corporate taxes, the revenue went up. So they ended up making much more money, the state did. So it makes sense in the long run to do that.
anyone else? Delegate
Sure. So I probably won't give you an answer, yay or nay. What I will say is this, that our state needs to diversify in revenue streams. And if it means that, you know, it would bring additional businesses our way and provide additional opportunities, then absolutely, that may be the direction to go. I certainly do prefer to do additional research on it to make sure that that is the correct way to go with that. But diversification and knowing firsthand that our businesses have a lot of taxes and fees, and that does need to be addressed in the state of Maryland. Oftentimes, people leave our state to go to neighboring states because of some of the challenges around those taxes. So to that end, to answer your question, I believe that it certainly warrants a lot of research and to figure out what is not being said. Oftentimes, we'll come up here and say, oh, yeah, great, we'll do this. But have we looked at the consequences or what's the other side of this as well? I actually did a thesis on this to get my master's degree. What are the unintended consequences? So I prefer to do a little bit additional research.
1 second, okay.
The biggest challenge with that bill is the fiscal note. The fiscal note writer only writes one side of it, what they're seeing in the percentage of cut. They don't look at what we just heard about in the other state where trickle-down economics truly works, and it's, you know, it's the best thing the state could have done.
2 questions from the audience left, and I'll wrap it up with that. Have you received the Maryland Economic Council's report to the governor, and what were your impressions? Or if the answer is no, I guess you have no impressions. Johnny?
I'm not, who, I
See, I don't
have
teach you to
not
look at
received
me.
it. No, I have not
Okay.
received that report.
I guess that answers the question. Mary?
I will make sure you get it. We spent a year going over this. We gave the governor October 1st a report, and our very first recommendation was to lower the corporate income tax.
Thank you.
And the second question, which tags along in the same vein, is we heard the Senate president talk about, this is a question from the audience. We heard the Senate president talk about the fact that there, and I was really impressed with the fact that he jumped right in with this, but a big part of his presentation is wherever they go with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and the government efficiency push in Washington, be quite frank, I'll be shocked if the FBI center is actually built in either Maryland or Virginia. I think they're going to probably put it in Texas. And if they move ag out to Iowa, as was suggested, the 5 richest counties in the country are positioned around Washington, D.C., including Prince George's and Montgomery. If we lose a lot of very high-paying jobs, the work you guys are talking about with respect to budget deficits is going to be dramatically worse in the next 2, 3, 4 years. Is there anything we can do to prepare for that other than just be even more aggressive in the vein you've been discussing? Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, once again, we talk about the Augustine Commission. That was done, let me just be blunt, that was done in 2015 and 2016. The first year was regulation, the second year was taxes. You know, we did some things. We reorganized DBED and turned it into the Department of Commerce, sort of coordinated some of the efforts that relate to economic development and how the state does that. But for the most part, the state did not actually take some of the most high value recommendations and put them in place. But had they done that 10 years ago, where would we be today? We might be talking about a different conversation. That maybe, just maybe, state of Maryland leaders would understand that at some point a $35 trillion debt is possible, and that at some point Maryland's going to get slammed when the federal government runs out of money. Are you telling me nobody who's been a leader in our state in the legislature has anticipated this? I disagree. I think that it's been an essential element of how we've gotten by for the past number of years. Here we are. We've been talking about this for a decade, and we've done nothing. So what do you expect us to do? Well, you expect us to talk a big game. You expect us to try to balance a budget, which is constitutionally required, and then we're going to turn right around and do that, the other bill, BRFA, and we'll raise taxes, and we'll spend money here and there and everywhere. And in 2 years, you're going to have not $3 billion in deficit. It's going to be like $6 billion in deficit. We're not California, and we're surely not the United States that can print money. We're in trouble. There's no doubt about it. If they're going to acknowledge it now, great idea. Should have fixed it a decade ago. Sorry.
Any other thoughts?
Sure.
Delegate Hartman?
Oh, go ahead.
Delegate Sample.
As I mentioned when I was in the panel, you know, the reality of that is, you know, it certainly could happen. And that's why I said these things that we're talking about, trickle-down economics works. I don't care what anybody says. They spent more time talking about the accuracy of the question with the numbers related to Trump's success as opposed to answering the question. And that's all the more reason why now we need to start doing some of these things about lowering taxes and lessening regulation so that we can create private sector jobs. We need to. And here in NASA afterwards, you know what? That was great. That was a great follow-up to the panel we had. But, you know, there's something right there in our state. We need to look at those private sector jobs that they need. We need to bring them here. We need to focus on the private sector. And that seemed like a great segue into that.
Delegate Beauchamp?
As far as regulation goes, I think that that's probably what the real, to me, the catalyst to really boost business here. You look at a company like Pepsi-Cola Bottling Company, been in business 103 years. You know, MDE put enough pressure on them that they're going to manufacture all the Pepsi in North Carolina. Why? Well, I mean, you know, when you have a viable facility here and you chase them out because of environmental regulation, you're talking about now an impact from the city of Salisbury is probably $1 million in sewer and water. And nobody's looking, nobody's paying attention. You know, it's like, you know, Mount Air went through the issue with the you know, the water issue, and basically it was $300 million. You know, it ended up being $300 or $400 million that Mount Air was impacted, probably more. I don't know, Zach, was it more than, it was several hundred million. Well, Purdue's facing the same thing. And, you know, the environmental regulation, you know, when you look at PFAS, you know, okay, they've brought the number down as far as, you know, 4 parts per trillion. You know, that's, you know, that's, we have to look at regulation, and we have to really think about it because we're driving the businesses out.
Delegate Sample Hughes?
Sure. Locally, we really do need to be concerned about the proposed changes at the federal level. while we might think about what the concerns may be around the Montgomery County, D.C. corridor, but right here on the Eastern Shore, we have a lot of people who have moved here who are working from home and working for these federal agencies. And you may not really realize that, but it's the case. And people have moved to communities that have just came up by leaps and bounds. Sassafras community, about 300-400 homes over there, and walking in the neighborhood and talking to people, those are federal employees. And so we will see a huge problem of either people leaving the state and our community altogether to seek jobs elsewhere if we don't acknowledge, number one, some of the businesses that we have here that people don't know about, to really look to see other opportunities that are available. When I was the president of the Tri-County Council, we used to do field trips to go around to businesses that we don't normally talk about on the Eastern Shore to say, hey, this is here. This is a business that does work throughout the nation, but they're housed here. And I think we're going to have to make that known to persons who reside here and work for the federal government, because if you have like the Department of Education, Department of Justice, and changes at NSA, we are going to be in a problematic situation here. And so it's not just the Western Shore communities. We have people that live here and are working for the federal government as well. So our broadband is really an area that I'm proud to say that we're moving significantly on, but it's more important, more so now than ever.
Last call for questions from the tables, and don't complain if you didn't get your question answered.
Can I wrap
You had
up
your
on
chance.
that? Can I wrap on that one?
go
Okay,
ahead.
I just don't want to leave people in the valley. Okay, yes, we are facing a tough budget, and everybody should take that as a takeaway. But let's not lose sight that when you look around this room, we have some of the most creative and best in the business whether it comes to our private sector leaders, whether it comes to our education leaders, whether it comes to our community leaders. And we talked about job creation, and we've talked about economic development. We need to keep taking a regional approach, not any one county or town, and need to do that in partnership. We talk about these workforce shortages, and we're doing a lot here on the shore to address that. We have opportunities as well as these budget challenges. So we do need you up in Annapolis this session. We need to pick some of these priorities and run with them. But again, I think that we pick out a couple priorities, we work together. We'll continue to be successful because this is the best place to live in the state of Maryland.
Senator Mautz, a minute to wrap up.
Sure. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that the changes that are coming are going to empower rural economies, the small independent businesses. You get the sense over the last, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, they've just been overcome with rules and regulations. And the state's been able to manage its budget for a large part because of the federal dollars that have been coming into Maryland. And the state's going to have to realize that there are other sources where revenues can come from, and they're going to have to adopt those and embrace them. And, you're going to hear about the deficit. I haven't really talked about this today. The $2.7 billion is based off of estimated revenue, so it's probably just by nature, it'll be over $3 billion by the time we go back to session. There'll be another estimate that comes out. People will talk about deficit. Remember, it's not deficit. It's the economy. Our economy is so sluggish. It's not growing. It's not the deficit. Yes, we need to cut spending. There needs to be a cut there. But where Maryland is missing is that we are not attracting investment. We're not incentivizing growth. We're not supporting small independent businesses. They're being smothered right now. And that's a big problem. So when you hear deficit, don't think, oh my gosh, taxes, because that will be a discussion, taxes because of deficit. No. When you hear deficit, say, what can we do to grow the economy? That should be the answer.
Right. So Senator Carozza made a terrific point, and it's worth just reinforcing that our country went through an election cycle that really, before it's all said and done, is going to benefit everybody from California to Maryland. Fracking and natural gas, I'm 52 years old. Natural gas will be here for the balance of my lifetime. Sorry about it. Maryland, you want to ban it. Maybe one state can try, but it's going to fail. We're going to have to fix this policy, that kills innovation, kills economic growth, and it's going to happen federally. So I applaud what happened. EV mandates, I'm sorry, they're going to go away. Maybe California stands alone, and maybe they take whatever policy they think is going to work for their few million people that can afford these expensive and unreliable forms of transportation. But nationally, those mandates should go away, and Maryland didn't pass a law to do that. They did it through legislative or executive fiat, and I don't think Maryland can follow through. So my point out of all this is Maryland is in trouble. I mean, I think the valley that the senator talks about, we're in it, man. We're in it. And I hope that the budget responds in a productive way. I hope that the legislature is not as vindictive as it was when Trump won the first go around, because it doesn't help Marylanders when that happens. We have to react and respond to the reality that exists today, which is that the country spoke, Maryland has to listen, and frankly, Maryland's right next to Washington, D.C. To ignore the reality that this is going to hurt some of our counties financially and the state financially is just to acknowledge the reality so we can do what any other business person would do under the same or similar circumstance, which is figure things out and rework your plan. We've got a lot to rework, no doubt about it, and I'm here for it. I'm a fighter and a scrapper. I don't mind fighting for Marylanders and make sure that we do what's required, which is balance our budget and do the right thing with the taxpayers' dollars.
You know, legislature years are like 7-1 over regular years. Delegate Hartman.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I think I've said enough. I've delayed vacation to be here. So the only thing standing between me and vacation, it starts in like 10 minutes when I get out that door. So there you go, Barry.
I think I have a new plan for next year.
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity to get to speak to you. You know, it's all new to me. You know, I'm looking forward to the first session. I hired someone that's basically has 9. She's got 9 sessions behind her, so I've got some pretty good help. And it's funny because one of the questions that I was supposed to have was, what's going to be my most difficult challenge? And I was going to say that Senator Mautz, he gave me a compliment at one of the other meetings. He said, Barry, it's going to take you 6 months to figure out all these acronyms. And to be honest with you, I'll never figure them out in 6 months because there's way too many of them.
Delegate Sample Hughes.
That's it.
Welcome to Annapolis. I've been there 11 years, and we still have some things we need to figure out. But I'm just real briefly, just want to say thank you again for opportunity to be here. You know, we're going to Annapolis, so we need to see you in Annapolis. Yes, we still have the access of Zoom, which is extremely beneficial to those who can't travel or can't let their voice be heard physically. But physical presence is still welcome. I'm looking forward to, an interesting session. But I do say this, we certainly need to work our nonprofit community as well, meaning that oftentimes we look for our government to solve a lot of problems and to say this is a deficit, this is a challenge. But some of our nonprofits are there, they're ready and prepared to help when we have issues and we need support in the mental health space. Because when our insurance companies don't cover certain things, our nonprofits, they step up to the plate, and they do the same with our young people. And so to that end, I think if we continue to support our community, our region, we'll be stronger, even though there will be some major challenges financially from the federal down to the state government. But again, welcome to Annapolis, and we look forward to seeing you all there.
Delegate Otto, if you could hang on just a second. Something got past me earlier. I meant to clarify just for the benefit of this group, and it fits exactly with where Delegate Sample Hughes was just going about our involvement. We mentioned earlier, Delegate Hartman was talking about combined reporting coming back, and I'm not sure that everyone in this room understands what that is, but if you have a business that has locations in both a different state, say Delaware and Maryland, all of the revenue from those 2 businesses would be combined to be taxed in Maryland. Contrary to what, as a chamber, what we believe the legislature believes, and that is a windfall space to make up the budget deficit, we think that's going to be a windfall for tax attorneys and corporate litigators, or just attorneys who build corporations, because we'll simply move our corporations out of Maryland. I think it is a personal opinion. I think it would be disastrous, and you will hear us call upon you to do, as Delegate Sample Hughes said, be present. If that kind of legislation comes up and you get something from us indicating that that's happening, please be prepared to weigh in. Let your legislators know how you feel. And if it means going to Annapolis, we would all love to be in business in Maryland indefinitely and have a tremendous quality of life. It's our goal for everyone, but we have to be willing to take part. So forgive me for belaboring that. Delegate Otto, your 1 minute to wrap up.
Thank you, Greg, for pointing out that combined reporting. That's been a challenge we've fought for several years now, and it has a big impact on a lot of agricultural companies, be it the tractor suppliers and things as well that have a presence in Maryland. It's a disincentive. I thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and the Maryland Chamber has had a broader presence in the last few years, I felt, since I first took office. And do we have a tax problem in Maryland or a revenue problem? I took office in 2011, January of 2011, and our budget was $35 billion. And we passed a $65 billion budget this year. So where's the problem?
That sounds like a pretty good way to wrap things up. I'm sorry, Johnny wanted to add one more thing.
And our delegation, we want to invite everybody. We started doing this. It's an annual thing in Annapolis. It's called District Night. So District 37 is having its District Night on Monday, February 3rd from 5 to 7 o'clock at the Market House. Our session goes in at 8 o'clock, so if you've got some time on a Monday and want to come up and visit Annapolis and see everyone, we provide heavy hors d'oeuvres and things like that. We'd like to invite everyone to join District 37 on February 3rd from 5 to 7 at the Market House.
So invited. I toyed with the idea of not having these nameplates up here, but having mirrors, because these folks are your representatives in Annapolis. Let's give them a big hand for being here to help hear from you. Thank you all for being here. Bill Chambers? Oh, there you are. I knew you had to be here somewhere. I'll let you wrap us up.
How about another round of applause for our legislators? Could you all just hang for a minute? We'll get a quick photo. I want to thank all our sponsors. Thank you, Beacon and the Purdue School. What a great host. I hope you all got something out of this today. Thank our speakers. We'll be back again next year for the 38th. Have a great weekend and a wonderful Christmas. Thanks, everybody.